Imagine this. It's a crisp fall afternoon, and a father, weathered by years of hard work and sacrifice, stands quietly in his modest living room. His daughter, fresh out of college and still clutching her cap and gown from graduation, looks on with a smile that mixes pride with confusion. He reaches into his jacket pocket and pulls out a small, velvet box. It's worn around the edges, like it's been carried through more than just years, through decades. With trembling hands, he opens it to reveal an antique ring, vintage, gold, with a soft glimmer that catches the light just right. She thinks it's a sentimental gesture, maybe a family heirloom passed down like a generational whisper. But when she takes that ring to a jeweler to resize it, something happens that no one saw coming. The jeweler's eyes go wide, his voice drops, and what he says next doesn't just change how she sees her father. It turns her entire family's past upside down. Now, before we go any further, let me tell you something straight. You didn't click on this video by accident. Deep down, you're here because something inside you is drawn to the kind of mystery that makes the hair on your arms stand up. You're not just curious. You need to know what that jeweler found, why he reacted the way he did, and how a simple ring could unlock secrets that have been buried for over 40 years. I promise you this. By the end of the story, you'll have your answer. Not just about the ring, but about the people tied to it, the choices that shaped their lives, and the haunting truth that had to be hidden for decades. But first, let me talk to you not as a narrator, but like a friend. Because this isn't just a story you watch. It's a story you feel. And once it pulls you in, it doesn't let go. So sit back, silence your notifications, and really listen. Because the more you pay attention, the more the pieces start to come together. And, trust me, some of them will hit you harder than you expect. Now let me paint the scene a little more. The father's name is Tom Holloway. A humble man in his late 50s, he's the kind of guy who fixes things with his hands, keeps his emotions tucked beneath a layer of dry humor, and holds memories in his eyes more than his words. He's lived in the same small Pennsylvania town his whole life. Works in HVAC. Drives an old Chevy that coughs on cold mornings. Doesn't say much, but when he does, people listen. He raised his daughter, Emily, mostly on his own after her mother passed away in a car accident when she was just 7. That ring? Emily had never seen it before, not in photo albums, not in drawers. It was as if it had appeared out of nowhere. And when she asked about it, all Tom said was, it belonged to someone important. That's where things get weird. Emily, now 22, is sharp, driven, and observant. She's got that kind of energy that can walk into a room and quietly change its atmosphere. She's not the type to wear flashy jewelry, but something about that ring captivated her. The design was unlike anything she'd seen. Intricate carvings, a gemstone that shimmered strangely in the light. So she took it to a downtown jeweler for resizing, just a small errand before her first job interview the following Monday. Nothing serious. Until the jeweler, a man who'd been in business for over 40 years, took one look at the ring, and his expression froze. His hands began to shake. He didn't say much at first, just asked her to wait while he ran a few quick checks. Then, after nearly 20 minutes in the back room, he returned, not with a resized ring, but with a look on his face like he'd seen a ghost. And here's where the story shifts. The jeweler pulled out an old black binder and flipped through laminated pages filled with photos of rare stolen antiques. He didn't say the ring was stolen, at least not yet. But he did say something that Emily would never forget. You need to talk to your father, he told her. And you need to ask him where this really came from. Just like that, a gift meant to celebrate a milestone suddenly became a doorway to a hidden truth. One that had been sealed shut for decades. One that someone went to great lengths to forget. Now hold on, before you go thinking this is just another family drama or a recycled mystery, let me tell you right now, it's not. This isn't just about a ring. It's about identity, about long-lost connections, and how sometimes the smallest object can carry the heaviest secrets. It's about how our parents aren't always who we think they are. And sometimes neither are we. If you've ever looked at someone you love and wondered what parts of their past you never knew, this story will hit home hard. Emily, torn between curiosity and fear, confronts her father that evening. But his reaction? Not what she expected. He doesn't deny it, doesn't get angry. Instead, he goes silent. He walks out to the garage, pulls down a dusty shoebox from the top shelf, and places it between them on the kitchen table. Inside are letters, old, fragile, yellowing with time. Photos of people she doesn't recognize. A woman holding a baby. A man in a military uniform. A birth certificate with a name she's never heard before. And at the very bottom, a newspaper clipping dated July 1981 with a headline that sends a chill through her entire body. Infant abducted from local hospital. Search still ongoing. So now you're probably wondering, is Emily the baby from that headline? Was her father involved in something criminal? Or is the truth even more complicated than it seems? I know you've got questions swirling in your head right now, and that's exactly where I want you. Because this story is about to twist in ways you'll never see coming. What you think is the truth will get shattered. More than once. And every time you think you've figured it out, another layer peels back to reveal something deeper. That's why you need to stick with me. Because you're not just watching the story, you're part of unraveling it. And I promise, by the time we reach the end, every thread will be tied. Every secret revealed. And one final truth will leave you speechless. So don't click away. Don't scroll. This isn't just another background video while you check your phone. It's the kind of story that stays with you, the kind you'll want to talk about. Maybe even share with someone you trust. Because what Emily discovers next, it's bigger than a ring. Bigger than her father. And it leads her to a place no one ever expected, where a decades-old mystery finally surfaces and the truth changes everything. And just when she thinks she's finally uncovered the full story, someone shows up at her door claiming to know the real origin of that ring and who it was meant for. In the days leading up to the moment that ring changed everything, Emily Holloway's life had been, by all accounts, ordinary. Maybe even predictable. She had just graduated from Temple University with a degree in journalism, a decision she had once made in honor of her mother, who had written community pieces for the local newspaper before her untimely death. Emily was sharp, thoughtful, and observant, traits her professors often praised, but like most recent grads, she was also navigating that awkward space between structured college life and the uncertainty of real adulthood. She had recently moved back home to the small Pennsylvania suburb where she grew up, partly to save money while job hunting, but also to keep an eye on her father, who had grown quieter and more distant in recent months. Tom Holloway wasn't sick, but there was something unspoken lingering in the way he stared out the window longer than usual or hesitated before answering simple questions. Emily had chalked it up to aging, or maybe loneliness, but the deeper she looked, the more she sensed there was something he was carrying that went beyond day-to-day stress. Her father had always been the quiet kind. Never dramatic. Never one to raise his voice. After her mother died in that tragic car crash, when Emily was still in elementary school, Tom became a rock. Firm, stable, always there. He cooked, he cleaned, he sat through every dance recital and PTA meeting, even if his eyes sometimes looked haunted during family events. He never talked much about his own childhood or where he'd come from, and Emily never pushed. She figured he had his reasons. But now, after the jeweler's reaction to the ring and the mysterious documents hidden in the shoebox, Emily started to view her entire childhood through a different lens. What if there were chapters of his life deliberately erased or rewritten? What if the father she'd trusted all her life had secrets darker than she ever imagined? That week, Emily canceled all her job interviews. Something told her she wasn't ready to move forward until she uncovered the truth. She tried asking Tom more questions, but he brushed them off or changed the subject, insisting that everything would make sense in time. So she did what any curious journalist in training would do. She started digging. She returned to the jeweler's shop to see if he remembered anything else, but he seemed reluctant to talk further. He claimed he had said too much already, that if the ring was connected to what he thought it was, it could stir up trouble. That cryptic warning only made her more determined. She began researching old newspaper archives, especially anything related to the 1981 hospital abduction, and sure enough, the article she found in the shoebox had more layers than she'd initially realized. The baby taken from the hospital was never found. The parents, Margaret and Daniel Crestwood, had moved away soon after the investigation dried up. No suspects were ever named, and the only clue was a nurse who claimed she saw a man in an HVAC uniform near the nursery wing just hours before the child disappeared. It seemed like a stretch. Her father did work in HVAC, but he would have been only a teenager at the time of the abduction. Still, the coincidence was unsettling. She wondered whether the clipping was simply something her father had kept from a past news story that touched him, or if it was something else entirely. And then there were the letters. Dozens of them, handwritten and postmarked from different parts of the country, signed only with the initials LM. Each one mentioned a girl, never by name, but always referred to as our sunbeam, or the little bird. Some were poetic, others rambling, but all had the unmistakable undertone of longing, of a connection cut too soon. The return address was blurred, likely water-damaged over the years, and Emily couldn't tell whether the sender was a grieving parent, a former lover, or something far more complicated. But things took an even stranger turn when Emily decided to visit her Aunt Carol, her mother's sister, and one of the few family members still living in the area. Carol had always been a little aloof, especially after her sister's death, but Emily figured she might shed light on the ring's origins or Tom's past. What she got instead was a strange deflection. Carol's demeanor shifted the moment Emily mentioned the ring. Her fingers tightened around her teacup. She said she didn't know anything about old jewelry, claimed it was probably something from a flea market, and changed the topic to Emily's job search. But Emily noticed something telling. When she said the jeweler had mentioned the ring might be stolen, Carol's lips parted ever so slightly, like the air had been sucked out of the room. It was just a flicker, but enough to catch a journalist's eye. Carol was hiding something. Emily left the house with more questions than answers. That night, she lay awake, replaying old memories in her head, moments that seemed insignificant before but now felt like puzzle pieces. Like the time she found her father burning old papers in the backyard when she was 12. Or when he refused to let her apply for a summer internship in Boston, citing safety concerns that made no sense. Or how he once pulled over on a road trip to New York, stared at a passing town sign for a full minute, and then turned the car around without explanation. Still, for every clue that pointed toward some hidden truth, there were moments that muddied the waters even more. Emily found a birth certificate in the shoebox with her name on it, but the date and hospital didn't match the one on her original birth documents, which her father kept in the fireproof safe. Which one was real? And then came the red herring that nearly derailed her investigation entirely, an anonymous envelope in their mailbox with no return address, just a single sentence written on aged typewriter paper. The man you call Dad isn't who you think he is. No explanation. No signature. Just that. The letter could have come from anyone. A prank. A mistake. Or maybe someone who knew too much. As she tried to piece together the timeline, Emily considered the possibility that someone else could have planted the ring, maybe to frame her father or lead her down the wrong path. After all, why would he keep something so obviously incriminating if he had something to hide? Wouldn't he have destroyed it years ago? Unless he wasn't trying to hide the truth. Maybe he was waiting for her to be ready to discover it. That theory gave her a strange sense of comfort, but also raised new questions. Who else knew about the ring? Could someone be watching them now, waiting to see what she would do with it? The tension at home grew unbearable. Tom became even more distant, barely speaking at dinner. At one point, Emily noticed him looking through the letters late at night, holding one in particular longer than the rest. When she tried asking about it, he just said, "Not yet," and slipped it back into the box. That same week, someone tried to break into their garage. Nothing was taken, but the door had been jimmied open. Police called it a random act, maybe a drifter or a local kid. But Emily didn't believe in coincidences anymore. The ring, the letters, the newspaper clipping, the anonymous note, all of it pointed to something far bigger than a forgotten family heirloom. It felt like she had stumbled into the middle of a cold case that someone, somewhere, still wanted to keep buried. And then came the moment that shifted everything once again. Late one night, as Emily was sifting through old boxes in the attic, she found a photograph wedged behind a loose panel. It was faded and torn, but the image was clear enough. A woman with dark curls, holding a baby. Standing beside her was a man Emily had never seen before. But the baby? She recognized the birthmark on the child's neck. It was identical to her own. The woman, based on the dates, couldn't have been her mother. Which meant one thing: Emily's entire origin story might have been fabricated. And whoever that man was in the picture, he might still be out there. But before she could ask her father about it, before she could even process the implications, her phone buzzed. An unknown number. The voice on the other end was low and deliberate. The man said he knew the truth about the ring, and he wasn't the only one looking for it. That's when the real mystery began. The call rattled Emily in a way she hadn't expected. The man's voice wasn't threatening, exactly, but it was calm. Too calm, like someone used to power, someone who didn't need to shout to be taken seriously. He didn't say his name. He didn't say what he wanted. All he said was, the ring was never supposed to resurface. And if you know what's good for you, you'll stop asking questions. This doesn't concern you anymore. Then he hung up. No number. No way to trace it. The line went dead, as if the whole thing had been a ghost transmission. Emily sat in her dark bedroom for a long time after that, clutching the phone, trying to convince herself that it was just another scare tactic, maybe a weird coincidence, someone who heard about her asking questions and decided to mess with her. But her gut told her otherwise. This wasn't random. This wasn't a prank. Someone was watching her. Someone knew exactly how close she was getting to something real. The next morning, Emily went to the local library to pull more archives on the Crestwood family, hoping to find marriage records, property listings, anything that could give her a lead. But when she got to the newspaper reel from 1981, the week of the abduction, those pages were missing. Not misfiled.
Gone.
Torn out clean, like someone had come in before her and removed them with surgical precision. The librarian, an elderly woman named Marcia, who'd worked there for 30 years, told her she'd never seen anything like it. "We don't get many researchers asking about that case," she said, her voice just above a whisper. "You're the second one this month." That froze Emily in place. Someone else was looking into this. And they were ahead of her. Things only got stranger from there. That night, Emily went to check the shoebox, the letters, the ring, the photo. But it was gone. Completely vanished from the back of her closet where she had hidden it beneath an old stack of high school yearbooks. Her room hadn't been broken into. No signs of a struggle. Her laptop was untouched, as was her cash and jewelry. Whoever it was, they came only for the box. She rushed to her father, demanding to know if he had taken it, but the look on his face was one of genuine confusion, and then something darker.
Fear.
"They found us," he murmured. "I didn't think they would, after all this time." Emily pressed him for answers, but he locked up again, even more guarded than before. That night, he packed a duffel bag and sat in his truck for nearly an hour, just staring at the house. He didn't leave, but she could tell something inside him had snapped, like he was trying to decide whether to run or fight. She stayed up all night, waiting for him to come back inside. When he finally did, he looked defeated. "There's a lot I can't tell you," he said. "Not because I don't want to, but because once you know, there's no going back. And people get hurt." The next few days were filled with silence and suspicion. Emily tried to recreate what she could from memory. She wrote down everything she remembered from the letters, drew sketches of the ring symbol, and started researching local jewelers with expertise in antique family heirlooms. That's when she met Mark Hensley, a charming, silver-haired antique dealer in his late 50s who claimed he used to run appraisals for private collectors in New York before retiring early to a quieter life in the suburbs. Mark was helpful, maybe too helpful. He listened patiently as Emily explained the strange circumstances around the ring, nodding with a kind of knowing sympathy that seemed rehearsed. When she showed him her sketch of the emblem on the ring, his eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and for just a second, his hand trembled. He said he recognized the symbol, claimed it was part of a lesser-known guild that dated back to post-war Europe, a secret group that specialized in tracking and reclaiming stolen family heirlooms from Jewish families displaced during the Holocaust. Emily had never heard of it, and though the story sounded plausible, something about it didn't sit right. She asked if there were any records she could see, names, or case studies, but he dodged her questions with vague answers about confidentiality agreements and client privilege. Still, he insisted on helping her, saying he had contacts who could trace the symbol further if she gave him time. Emily thanked him and left, but her instincts were on high alert. Something about Mark's timing, his availability, even the way he always seemed to know when she'd be stopping by. It didn't add up. She decided to do some background digging and quickly realized there were no public records on a Mark Hensley living in the area until 2 years ago. Before that, he was practically a ghost, no LinkedIn, no business licenses, no real estate holdings under his name. The address he gave her led to a private mailbox rental service. And the number he called from? A prepaid burner phone. That night, another envelope appeared on her windshield. This time, it held a photograph, grainy and printed in black and white. It showed a much younger Tom Holloway standing beside a woman who looked nothing like Emily's mother. The woman had short hair, a hard stare, and she was holding a newspaper in her hand with a headline Emily could barely make out. Crestwood family pleads for child's safe return. On the back of the photo, scrawled in angry, looping cursive, were 5 words that chilled her to the bone. He took more than the ring. She stared at the photo for hours, her thoughts racing in 100 directions. What did it mean? Who was the woman? And what else had her father taken? Was he the man in the HVAC uniform? Was that why he burned papers in the backyard all those years ago? Was her whole life a carefully constructed lie? Before she could even begin to answer those questions, she received another unexpected visitor. Carol showed up at the house the next day, pale and visibly shaken. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. When Emily asked what was wrong, Carol reached into her purse and pulled out an old cassette tape. "I didn't know what to do with this," she whispered. "I was told to destroy it, but I couldn't. I kept it all these years. I think it's time you heard it." Emily stared at the tape, suddenly aware that she was holding a piece of a story that might not just rewrite her past, but could put her future in danger. And just before she could ask Carol what was on it, there was a knock at the door. Not loud, not urgent, but slow, deliberate. Emily froze, because no one was supposed to know they were home. Emily didn't move at first. She just stared at the front door, heart pounding, barely breathing. Carol looked at her with wide, terrified eyes, clutching the old cassette tape like it was the only thing tethering her to reality. The knock came again, 3 slow taps, each one sounding more like a warning than a request for entry. Whoever was out there wasn't just stopping by. They wanted to be noticed. They wanted her to be afraid. Emily motioned for Carol to be quiet and crept toward the window, carefully peeling back a corner of the curtain just enough to see the porch. But no one was there. No car in the driveway. No silhouette disappearing down the street. Just stillness. She stepped back, her mind racing with possibilities. Was it Mark? Someone else trying to silence her? Or was this just the next move in a long, well-orchestrated game that had started long before she was ever born? The doorbell never rang. No note was left. But when Emily cautiously opened the door 10 minutes later, her stomach dropped. Sitting on the welcome mat was a small cardboard box, perfectly square, wrapped in twine. Not tape, not glue, just old-fashioned twine, tied in a neat bow like a gift from another era. Carol instinctively stepped back, her hands shaking. Emily didn't want to open it, but she knew she had to. She carried it inside, placed it on the dining table, and slowly peeled away the twine. Inside was a single, yellowed photograph. This one was even older than the last. A group of men standing in front of what looked like an old train station, all wearing uniforms. One of them looked eerily like her father, but younger, leaner, with eyes that held the same heavy sadness. Scribbled across the back was a message. "Everything starts and ends with Holloway." Carol gasped when she saw it. She sat down hard in the nearest chair and pressed a hand to her mouth. "That station. I've seen it before," she whispered. "It's in Michigan. My sister used to live near there. She told me a story once about a man who showed up in their neighborhood out of nowhere in the early 90s, using a fake name. Said he'd been part of some recovery team overseas, but never explained what that meant. One day, he just vanished. Left everything behind. She looked up at Emily, voice trembling. That man, he looked exactly like your father. Emily didn't know what to believe anymore. Everything she thought she knew was unraveling. Her dad had always been quiet about his past, but now it seemed that silence wasn't just personal, it was calculated. Protective, maybe. Or maybe something darker. She needed to confront him again, but first, she had to listen to the tape. She and Carol dug through an old storage bin in the garage and found an ancient cassette player with just enough life left in it to play the tape. As it whirred to life, the room filled with static, then a voice. A woman's voice. Shaky. Nervous. If anyone hears this, that means I failed. They told me not to get involved. But I had to know. I had to know what happened to Jacob. And now I think they're coming for me. The voice was unfamiliar, but the name, Jacob, sent a chill through Emily. She remembered it from one of the letters in the shoebox. A name mentioned only once, scribbled in the margin of a note like it was too dangerous to say aloud. Jacob knew the truth, the voice continued. He found the ledgers. He knew the ring wasn't just a family heirloom. It was proof. They used it as a marker, a signal. Every time it changed hands, someone disappeared. And I think he was the last one. Before the tape could finish, the player sputtered and died. Emily stared at it, stunned. It couldn't be coincidence that she had been handed this just days after finding the ring. And now she knew that Jacob, whoever he was, had tried to expose something decades ago and paid the price. It made her wonder, who else had vanished along the way? Were they all connected to the ring? Was her family somehow a part of something far more sinister? The questions kept piling up. The same night, while trying to dig up more records online, Emily got a call from her cousin Brian, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. He sounded panicked, his words rushed. Emily, I need to talk to you. I got a letter. No return address. Just my name. Inside was a picture of you from last week. You were outside that antique shop. And someone circled your face in red ink. What the hell is going on? Emily's blood ran cold. Someone was watching her. But why involve Brian? He lived 2 states away. They weren't close. Why pull him into this now? She asked him to send a photo of the letter and the envelope. Within minutes, she had it in her inbox. Same handwriting. Same type of paper as the other notes. The photo was taken from across the street, as if someone had followed her for hours, waited for the perfect moment, and then sent the proof to a relative, just to rattle her. This wasn't about just keeping secrets anymore. It was psychological warfare. Suddenly, everyone in Emily's life felt like a question mark. Her father was hiding something. Carol clearly knew more than she let on. Mark was helpful, but his past didn't hold water. And now Brian had been dragged into the mess without ever asking for it. The conspiracy was growing. It wasn't just about a missing ring or a broken family heirloom. It was about control, surveillance, and silencing anyone who got too close to a secret too old and too dangerous to see the light of day. Then, as if to add one final crack in the foundation of everything she believed, Emily stumbled on a new name while digging through court records. Abigail Crestwood. Listed as deceased in 1981. But the cause of death? Unknown. And, more chilling, there was a sealed probate file listed under Emergency Custodial Review. That phrase wasn't just rare, it was nearly unheard of. And the date of the filing? 2 weeks after the alleged abduction. 2 weeks after the world was told Abigail had vanished, she had been declared dead by someone with enough power to bury the truth. The file was sealed, but someone had redacted the clerk's name. And buried in the public side of the record was a single scan page. A signature. It didn't match anyone from the Crestwood family. But it was familiar. Because Emily had seen it before. It was the same signature that appeared on one of the oldest letters in the shoebox, just beneath the postscript. Trust no one. Not even the ones who saved you. She felt the air suck out of the room as the pieces started falling into place. Not to solve the puzzle, but to show how impossibly wide it had become. What started as a simple ring handed down from a father to a daughter had cracked open a secret legacy, a buried network, and now, a growing danger. But before she could breathe or make sense of what she'd found, the lights in the house flickered, then died completely. The room was plunged into darkness. And outside, somewhere in the still night air, a car engine idled without headlights, just waiting. The room was swallowed by darkness, and for a moment, all Emily could hear was the whir of her own breath, shallow and fast, rattling against her chest. Her fingers fumbled for her phone on the kitchen counter, finally grasping it with enough force to almost knock it to the floor. The screen lit up and cast a pale blue glow across her face, but the signal bar was empty. No service. Not even a flicker. She turned slowly, heart pounding in her ears, and crept toward the window, pulling the curtain back an inch with trembling fingers. The street should have been dimly lit by the orange glow of the old neighborhood lamps, but tonight it was pitch black. Not a single bulb burning. And there, parked just across the street under the cover of shadow, was the outline of a dark SUV, engine still humming quietly. It hadn't moved. Whoever was inside hadn't left. They were just waiting. Emily's mind raced. She wasn't just part of a mystery anymore. She was the target. This wasn't about a missing relative or a mysterious family heirloom. This was about silence, control. And the more she uncovered, the more dangerous it became to keep asking questions. She backed away from the window and grabbed her keys, her instincts screaming at her to run. But then she thought of Carol. She had gone home earlier, said she needed a break, and promised to return in the morning. Emily tried calling her, but her phone still wouldn't connect. The SUV hadn't moved, but her sense of time was slipping. Had it been watching her all day? Had it followed her from the records office? Every moment she thought back on suddenly seemed stained with uncertainty. Conversations, glances, the stranger on the corner, the cashier who looked too long at her ID. It was all beginning to blur into one cold realization. She was being watched. Desperate for answers, Emily decided to take the cassette and photo and head to her dad's house. She needed to see him in person. Hear the truth from his lips. No more half answers or cryptic warnings. She slid into her car, started it, and pulled away from the curb, watching the SUV in the rearview mirror. It didn't follow her at first. But 10 minutes into the drive, at a lonely stretch of road near the old canal bridge, headlights appeared behind her. The same dull, yellow tint. Same height. Same vehicle. It maintained a perfect distance, close enough to be seen, far enough to avoid suspicion to anyone else. Emily tried to shake it, took a sharp turn into a neighborhood she didn't recognize, and looped through alleys and side streets, but it stayed with her the entire time. When she finally reached her dad's street, she didn't pull into his driveway. She parked 2 houses down and approached on foot. The air felt heavy with tension, the way it does before a storm, and as she stepped onto the porch, something felt wrong. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The porch light was off, which was strange. Her dad always left it on for her. She knocked, then called his name. No answer. She tried the door, and, to her surprise, it was unlocked. A flood of dread swept over her as she stepped inside. The TV was still on in the living room, casting flashes of light across the walls, but there was no one in sight. A mug of coffee sat untouched on the table. His phone buzzed on the counter with a half-written text on the screen. "Emily, if anything happens to me, don't." That was it. Just those words. She picked up the phone, but it was locked. Her heart dropped when she walked into the hallway and saw the back door wide open, screen door swinging in the wind. Her father was gone. The police were called, of course. They arrived fast, but it felt too late. Emily tried to explain the pattern, the letters, the photograph, the tape, but to the officer it all sounded like conspiracy theory. Her dad was probably just out for a walk, maybe wandered off. He was older. People got confused. But Emily knew better. He didn't forget things. He didn't leave doors open or half-finished texts warning of danger. Something had happened to him, and she could feel it in her gut. Something violent. Something planned. The next morning, a plain manila envelope appeared under her windshield wiper. No stamps. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid, her father, tied to a chair in what looked like a windowless room. His head was slumped forward. She couldn't tell if he was unconscious or worse. Scrawled beneath the photo, in thick black ink, was a single sentence: "Keep digging, and he disappears forever." She dropped to her knees in the parking lot, gripping the envelope so hard her fingers turned white. It wasn't just a threat. It was proof. Proof she had touched something real. Something dangerous enough for someone to start taking people. Fear gave way to fury, but also a deep, gnawing helplessness. She had no idea who to trust, and worse, nowhere to turn. Even Mark had vanished. His number was disconnected, and when she drove to his apartment, it was empty, cleared out as if he'd never lived there. Was he taken too? Or had he been part of it all along? She thought back to all the times he'd conveniently appeared right when she needed help. The way he'd always steered the conversation, gently but firmly, away from certain topics. Had she walked into a trap? Was the whole thing staged to pull her in? And then another unexpected twist. Her father's bank account was drained overnight. Every penny gone, transferred to an offshore account in the Caymans under the name H. Trelane. Emily had never heard of that name before, but a reverse search led her to an obituary dated back to 1972. Whoever H. Trelane was, they were supposed to be long dead. The more she uncovered, the more questions unraveled in front of her. The ring. The tape. The photograph. Her father's double life. A name from the past, now haunting the present. A vanishing cousin. A sealed government file. Threatening letters, anonymous watchers, and now, the disappearance of the only person who might have had all the answers. She couldn't stop now. But she also knew, if she kept going, there would be no turning back. They had made that clear. Keep digging and people would vanish. But stop now, and the truth would stay buried forever. And just when she thought she'd seen the worst, she returned home to find the photo she'd hidden in her locked drawer gone, and in its place, a fresh one. This time it was a picture of her, asleep, in her own bed. No door had been broken. No window was open. Someone had been inside. Someone who knew where she lived, where she kept her evidence, and exactly how to terrify her without making a sound. And that was when Emily realized this mystery wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about survival. The air was thick with dread as Emily stood frozen in her living room, staring at the photograph of herself sleeping. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to call someone, anyone. But she knew by now the rules had changed. This wasn't about just digging up family secrets anymore. This was personal, calculated, and deeply invasive. Whoever had taken that photo had been inside her house, walked her floors, stood by her bed while she slept, and then slipped out like a shadow. She clutched the envelope tighter and turned on every light in the house, scanning every inch for signs of forced entry, but everything was intact. No broken locks, no cracked windows. It was as if the intruder had a key or never needed one. That thought alone nearly made her legs give out beneath her. Her mind raced, replaying every recent conversation, every shared glance, every moment of trust she had offered someone who might not have deserved it. That's when she remembered the voicemail. A few days earlier, she had missed a call from a number labeled "No Caller ID." When she finally checked it, the message had been nothing more than static. At least that's what she had thought. But now, driven by something between desperation and paranoia, she played it again. This time, she noticed a strange, low-frequency hum in the background and what sounded like a faint whisper layered beneath it. She transferred the file to her laptop, boosted the volume, and filtered the noise. When the whisper finally came through clearly, it made her skin crawl. "You're chasing the wrong man, Emily. He's not your father." Her breath caught in her throat. The voice didn't belong to anyone she recognized, but it was deliberate, calm, and chilling. She played it again and again, hoping she'd misheard, but the message was clear. She stumbled back from the computer and stared at the screen, her reflection in the dark glass, now looking like a stranger to her. What did that mean? Her father, not her father? Was it metaphorical? Or literal? Could it even be true? Driven by the horrifying possibility, she dug out one of the few remaining family photos she had, a shot of her as a baby, being held by a younger version of the man she'd always known as Dad. She flipped it over. A date, a location, and a name written in faint pencil. Emily, May 1996, Foot Ridge Hospital, Dr. Langford. But here was the thing. She had been born in Chicago, not Foot Ridge. And she had never heard of Dr. Langford in her life. Questions began piling up at a dizzying pace. Why would her birth certificate say Chicago if the photo placed her in an entirely different state? And why had no one in her family ever mentioned Foot Ridge? She knew what she had to do. She packed a bag, grabbed every piece of evidence she had, and hit the road just before dawn. Her destination was a small, now-defunct hospital in a rural town she'd never been to before. Foot Ridge was barely a pin on the map, just a handful of buildings, a gas station, and the crumbling shell of a medical facility that had shut down nearly 20 years earlier. The building was a ghost, but its records weren't. A local librarian, who'd spent decades archiving everything from newspaper clippings to hospital logs, recognized the name Dr. Langford immediately. He wasn't just any doctor. He'd been involved in a quiet federal investigation back in the late 90s over allegations of falsified birth records and illegal adoptions, but the case was sealed and the files never went public. Emily felt the bottom of her stomach drop. Everything was unraveling. Back at her motel, she spread the documents across the bed. Timelines weren't matching. Names were inconsistent. And that was when she found it. A discharge summary dated 2 weeks after her supposed birth, signed not by Langford, but by someone else entirely. Marla Thompson. She flipped through the old local clippings, and there it was, buried in the back pages of a 1997 town paper. Local nurse found dead in apparent suicide. Authorities suspect overdose. The article was vague and never followed up on. But now it felt like a lead. Emily began digging deeper, contacting the reporter who'd written the article. He was retired now and reluctant to talk, but after she sent him a photo of the hospital summary and told him her name, everything changed. His voice lowered, and what he told her chilled her to the core. Marla didn't overdose. She tried to expose something huge. She said babies were being taken, records rewritten. She left me a note the night she died. It mentioned one name I've never forgotten, Walter Gibbons. Emily's hands trembled as she jotted down the name. Walter Gibbons had come up once before, in a letter tucked inside the music box she'd found in her dad's basement. She had dismissed it then, as some long-lost friend. But now it had weight. She searched the name and found an old classified ad from a tech trade magazine in the early 2000s, tied to biometric encryption software and military-grade security systems. And then, almost as if fate had been listening, an email arrived from Mark. Not just an email. A full Dropbox link with a message. I had to disappear.
I found something you need to see.
But be careful who you trust. Even your mother knew. Emily hesitated, hovering over the link, her heart pounding. What was in the file? What did he mean about her mother? And why did it feel like the deeper she went, the closer she got to something not just dangerous, but world-shaking? As the file downloaded, a photo preview popped up. It was grainy, surveillance style. But the image was clear. Her father, standing outside a military installation, wearing a badge labeled Gibbons Project, Level 5 clearance. He wasn't who she thought he was. He never had been. And just like that, everything changed. Everything she believed about her family, her identity, even her own birth, it was all a lie. But the biggest question now wasn't what had happened. It was why, and what they were still willing to do to keep it hidden. Emily sat on the edge of the motel bed, her eyes bloodshot, her chest tightening under the crushing weight of what she now knew and what she didn't. The truth had splintered into so many jagged directions that it felt dangerous to move in any of them. The photo of her father, or the man she had believed was her father, outside a government facility labeled with the name Gibbons Project, had shaken her to her core. This wasn't just some obscure adoption scandal or a simple case of mistaken identity. Whatever she had stumbled into was bigger, older, and far more treacherous than she had imagined. And now, She had to decide what to do with that knowledge, knowing every step forward could cost her something permanent. Just as the weight of it all was closing in, her phone buzzed again, this time with a blocked call. She almost didn't answer, but when she did, she immediately recognized the voice. We need to talk," her mother said, calm but frayed. "Not on the phone. Meet me at the old church in White Hollow. You remember it." Emily froze. It wasn't just what her mom said, it was how she said it. No pleasantries, no panic, just urgency, like she already knew what Emily had discovered and had been waiting for this moment. Her mother, who had always been quiet about the past, always changed the subject when certain questions came up, always smiled with just a little too much restraint whenever her father was mentioned. Suddenly, all those years of subtle dodging made sense. And now, she was part of it, either as a reluctant witness or a willing participant. Emily didn't know what was worse. The drive to White Hollow was long, rural, and winding. Her thoughts raced. What if her mother had been involved in covering up the truth all along? What if she had knowingly raised Emily under a false name, in a false life? Or worse, what if she had done it to protect her from something even more dangerous? When Emily pulled into the empty gravel lot beside the crumbling church, her mother was already there, standing beside a rusted-out pickup truck she didn't recognize, arms crossed, eyes rimmed red but composed. "I didn't know how to tell you," she said the moment Emily stepped out. "I've been living in fear for too long. But they warned me if I ever told you, or if you ever started digging, someone would come for both of us." Emily didn't answer right away. She just stared at the woman who had raised her, who had kissed her forehead goodnight, who had packed her lunches and sent her off to school for years, knowing, all along, that their life was built on a foundation of deception. "So who is he?" she finally asked. "Is he my father?" Her mother looked away. "Not in the way you think." Before Emily could press for more, the older woman stepped toward the truck and opened the glove compartment, pulling out a thick manila envelope. Inside were birth records, photographs, and handwritten notes. Some of it confirmed what Emily had feared. But another part of it, buried in the stack, changed everything again. A redacted military document, half-burned but legible enough to reveal one critical phrase. Subject E. Rains, classified under Genetic Acquisition Protocol, non-voluntary. Emily's name was on that form. She was the subject. Her hands began to shake. "What is this?" "They didn't just take you," her mother whispered. "They created you." Everything tilted. Her whole life hadn't just been a cover, it had been part of a program. She wasn't just the victim of a stolen identity or some orphan shuffled through adoption fraud. She was a product of something bigger. Something engineered. Her childhood asthma, the night terrors, the strange memories she couldn't place, they weren't random. They were symptoms of something done to her before she ever had a say. Her mother's face crumbled, the cracks finally showing. "I was young, scared. Your father wasn't supposed to fall in love with me. He was part of the project. But he defected.
He stole you.
We ran. We changed everything." Emily staggered backward. The wind knocked from her chest. All this time, she thought she was hunting a hidden truth about her origins. She hadn't expected to find out she was the secret. And then the ultimatum came. That night, in the motel, another email arrived. No sender. Just a subject line. Last warning. Attached was a video. It was footage of her mother, standing at the edge of the churchyard, talking to someone who hadn't been there when Emily arrived. A man in a gray coat, blurred by the camera angle, but familiar in posture. It was Mark. The message was short and sharp. "Tell no one else. Return the files. Walk away. Or, we disappear her, too." Emily's heart shattered. The people behind this had eyes everywhere. They weren't just monitoring her, they were setting traps. Mark was compromised, or maybe he had never left the program at all. Was he trying to help her or control her? Now she had to choose. Turn the documents in and go back to pretending her life was real, safe, and untouched? Or keep digging, knowing she might not be able to save her mother, or herself if she did? Every instinct begged her to run. But something deeper, The part of her that had always felt out of place, that had always known something was wrong, told her the truth mattered more than her safety. She turned off the motel lights, locked the doors, and sat down at the table with the files spread before her like a puzzle of her own life. As she stared at the evidence, a flicker of clarity cut through the fear. She wasn't going to walk away, but she was going to need help. Real help. Not Mark. Not her mother. Someone who wasn't already on the inside. Because now it wasn't just about her past. It was about stopping whatever they were still doing before it reached someone else. Emily barely slept that night. Every creak of the motel floor, every hum of a car passing outside, set her nerves on fire. She had spread out the documents on the bedspread, every page now a breadcrumb in a much larger, more sinister trail than she'd imagined. The conspiracy she thought revolved around her own identity was just the beginning. The deeper she read into the files, cross-referencing the names, decoding the initials, matching locations, the more it became clear. There were others. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. She wasn't the only one. The program her mother spoke of wasn't some abandoned Cold War experiment. It was still active. Still operational. And worse, it had evolved. At the center of it all was a corporate name she hadn't paid much attention to until now. Coronix Biotech. It had appeared in passing, buried in footers, listed as a consulting firm attached to the Gibbons project. But a quick online search led her to a very polished, very current website boasting next-generation genetic therapies and AI-driven bioinformatics. It sounded like something out of Silicon Valley, all slick branding and buzzwords. But the address? It was only 3 towns over. And the CEO, Daniel Coren, had been photographed shaking hands with a senator Emily recognized from the news last month, a story tagged with keywords like government whistleblower, bioethics, and classified experiments. Panic bubbled under Emily's skin. This wasn't some forgotten military operation buried in dusty archives. It was right in front of everyone, repackaged under the guise of innovation and medicine. Her phone vibrated again. It was Mark. She stared at it for a long time before answering. His voice came through calm and careful, too careful. "You need to come with me, Emily. It's not safe for you there." Her throat tightened.
Why now?
"After all this time, why are you still trying to help me?" There was a pause. "Because you're not the only one they're watching. I've been trying to protect you since the beginning. But they found out."
We have to go underground now.
She hesitated. Something didn't add up. The footage of him speaking with the man in the gray coat still haunted her. "Were you at the church yesterday?" Another pause. "What?" "I saw a video. You were there. With someone." His voice faltered for just a beat. "That wasn't me, Emily." But it was too late. The doubt had taken hold. She hung up. Within minutes, her motel door rattled. Someone was on the other side. She grabbed the folder, stuffed the files into her backpack, and climbed out the back window barefoot into the cold gravel. Her car was parked half a block away. She sprinted, heart pounding so loud she thought it might echo across the parking lot. By the time she got on the road, headlights flared in her rearview mirror. She swerved onto a side road and drove without direction, the GPS off, her hands shaking on the wheel. The only person left she could trust was a name in the files. L. Finch. A former Coronix employee who had filed an internal complaint, only for it to disappear. According to a local news archive, L. Finch had gone missing 2 years ago. Presumed dead. But there were signs, a power bill still being paid, property tax records still current, pointing to a farmhouse deep in the woods near Milton. Emily drove straight through until dawn, arriving at the edge of a fog-drenched forest and a narrow, unpaved road leading into the trees. The farmhouse stood like a ghost, sagging porch, overgrown yard, windows shuttered from the inside. She knocked once, then twice. No answer. But she heard movement. A curtain shifted. The door opened just an inch. "I didn't think anyone would ever come here," the woman whispered. L. Finch was older than Emily expected. Haggard, haunted, but lucid. Her eyes locked on Emily's face and she whispered, "Your subject Echo." Emily's knees buckled. "What does that mean?" Finch let her in, bolting the door behind them. The living room was cluttered but organized: maps, surveillance photos, laptops, printouts. A wall covered in string-tied connections like something out of a conspiracy documentary. But none of it was fantasy. It was real. Finch had been tracking them all: the other test subjects, the missing scientists, the corporate executives involved in keeping it all buried. And now she showed Emily a locked box, inside of which was a flash drive. They're not just altering genetics, Emily. They're programming behavior, memory, emotion. You weren't just made. You were designed, and not just you. The others. All part of an experiment to engineer controllable humans. Soldiers. Operatives. Assets. You were meant to be activated when the time came. Emily stepped back, horrified. So, I'm some kind of weapon? Finch shook her head.
No.
You're the one they lost. The only one who slipped through the cracks. You weren't raised in the facility. You developed naturally. That makes you the most dangerous one of all. Before Emily could respond, the lights cut out. Darkness swallowed the room. Finch's face went pale. They're here. Everything descended into chaos. Glass shattered somewhere in the back of the house. Finch grabbed the flash drive and shoved it into Emily's hand. Get to the news. Upload everything. Blow it open. I'll hold them off. Emily didn't want to leave, but she had no choice. She ran again, into the woods this time, branches tearing at her arms, her lungs burning with fear and adrenaline. Behind her, gunshots cracked the morning air. She didn't look back. Not yet. Emily didn't remember much of the drive, just the image of Finch's face in the dim light before it went dark, the stifling pressure in her chest, and the wild pounding of her heart as her car barreled down an empty highway at dawn. Every second felt borrowed, every mile a thin thread pulling her closer to something she could no longer avoid. The flash drive burned a hole in her jacket pocket, but it wasn't just digital files anymore, it was proof. It was her past, her origin, her purpose. The one key that connected everything: her father's ring, her mother's silence, the missing records, the faces of strangers who looked just a little too much like her. And it led her straight to the headquarters of Coronix Biotech, an industrial glass fortress sitting on the outskirts of a tech campus, gleaming like nothing dark had ever happened behind its walls. She'd been driving for hours, planning her next move, but deep down, she knew there wouldn't be one. This was it. The last chapter. She wasn't coming to collect answers anymore. She was coming to expose them. She parked blocks away, crossed into the lobby on foot, wearing a stolen lab coat from a nearby university and using the ID badge Finch had smuggled out years ago. The building was cold, clinical, humming with quiet menace beneath all the sleek surfaces and polished metal. Nobody looked up as she walked past security. Nobody questioned her. The system didn't flag her. Which could only mean one thing. They were expecting her. The elevator opened before she pressed a button. Inside, standing perfectly still in a charcoal suit, was Daniel Corrin. His eyes were pale, unreadable, but there was a flicker of something behind them. Recognition? Regret? Or calculation? He didn't say a word as she stepped in.
The doors closed.
The silence felt alive, stretching the seconds like rubber bands ready to snap. Finally, as the floor lights blinked past 5, 6, 7, he turned toward her and said, "We've been waiting a long time for you, Echo." The name stopped her heart cold. "Don't call me that. It's who you are," he replied calmly. "You can run from your design, Emily, but it doesn't stop being real. You are the result of decades of planning, the proof that our work succeeded. And you have no idea what you've already done." "What I've already done?" she snapped. Corrin studied her like a parent watching a rebellious child. "You've activated others. Your presence has triggered dormant responses in the remaining subjects. The ones we couldn't find. You're not the final product, Emily. You're the spark." The elevator stopped on the 10th floor, but neither moved. Her brain was spinning, grasping at pieces that suddenly felt like they were falling into place. The nightmares, the strange reactions from people she met in passing, the gut feeling that she was being watched not just out of fear, but anticipation. Maybe she hadn't just escaped a project. Maybe she was the project. I'm not here to be part of your science fair, she hissed. I'm here to end it. Corin's smile was tight. Then you should know what you're ending. The doors opened to a stark white lab, empty but glowing with cold blue light. On the far wall, monitors showed surveillance feeds. Emily recognized her childhood home, the church, Finch's farmhouse now scorched in black and white. On the central monitor was live footage of a facility deep underground, rows of people asleep in glass pods, wired and still. Emily staggered forward, horrified. They were the others.
Dozens of them.
Maybe more. Young, old, male, female, each a variation of a similar genetic code. Her code. Corin walked past her to a terminal and inserted his own security key. With a few keystrokes, the room filled with soft alarms, and the pods began to glow red. They're waking up, Emily. And they'll come looking for their origin point. You. Something snapped inside her. She lunged for the keyboard, yanking the flash drive from her jacket and slamming it into the port. Finch's virus took seconds to ignite. The screens began to flicker, showing scrolling lines of code, file names flooding in, Project Genesis, Echo Protocol, emotion suppression trials, asset reconditioning reports. Every screen across Corinix was suddenly broadcasting their dirtiest secrets. Emily didn't wait. She grabbed Corin by the collar and shoved him against the wall, the impact rattling the steel paneling. You used us, she said, breathless with fury. You buried lives. You erased families. And now you want to turn us loose, like weapons on the world. Corin's eyes flashed, not fear, but something far worse. Conviction. You can't stop what's already begun. The world is broken, Emily. We're just shaping it into something better.
Cleaner.
Controlled. Before she could reply, the alarm system blared louder. Emergency lights bathed the room in pulsing red. Behind her, security forces stormed the hallway, but they stopped in their tracks, watching the monitors in horror. The data was leaking in real time, not just into the cloud but to media outlets, government watchdogs, activist forums. Finch had embedded the upload with trending hashtags, embedded keywords like DNA manipulation, cloning experiments, classified government biotech, whistleblower expose, and human trials gone wrong. Every word crafted to explode across search algorithms, YouTube feeds, and Twitter threads. But just as the data finished transferring, just as Emily felt the grip of victory rise in her chest, one of the monitors lit up with a live camera feed from her car. And there, bound in the back seat, was her father, pale, unconscious, with blood on his temple. Insurance, Corin whispered. We knew you'd be emotional. And we know what that leads to. Emily's body locked up with panic. Her hand trembled as she reached for the comm system. What do you want? But before Corin could answer, the monitor glitched and then changed. It showed the inside of the car again, except her father was gone. The back seat was empty. What? Corin muttered, stepping forward. And then the lab lights cut out completely. Pitch black. When they came back on, a man stood at the doorway. It was Mark. Except it wasn't the Mark she remembered. He was calm, poised, eyes sharp and glinting with something clinical. You were right, Daniel, he said coolly. She activated them. Emily turned, confusion and betrayal crushing her chest. Mark met her eyes. I'm not your friend. I'm the failsafe. But just as Corin moved to smile in triumph, Mark turned and shot him, once in the leg, once in the chest. Corin collapsed in shock, blood pouring from his mouth. Why? Mark looked down at him. Because you failed. Emily stood frozen. What are you? Mark walked over and handed her a new drive. All the activation protocols. The override keys. Use them or walk away. But either way, you're the one who decides what happens next. And with that, he vanished into the smoke of the burning lab, leaving her alone in a war that was no longer hidden. She stared down at the drive, the weight of the world now small enough to fit in the palm of her hand. And that's when the final twist hit her. The ring her father had given her, the antique that started it all, wasn't just a keepsake. It was the master key. The real question was, would she use it? Or was it already too late? The sky above the city cracked open with the slow burn of sunrise as Emily stood on the rooftop of the now-abandoned Koronix facility, the flash drive clutched in her hand, her fingers numb from both cold and adrenaline. Below her, news vans clustered like vultures, reporters buzzing with questions, drones slicing the air to capture every angle of what was being called the biggest leaked conspiracy in biotech history. Her face hadn't been made public yet, but it was only a matter of time. The files had gone viral overnight. TikTok was flooded with emotional reactions to the leaked footage of sleeping human test subjects. YouTube explainer channels had already picked apart every slide from the whistleblower dump, titles flashing with keywords like exposed, human cloning proof, bioengineering scandal, and real-life sci-fi project. Reddit threads had reached thousands of comments, and even late-night talk shows were calling it the most terrifying real-world plot twist in decades. Emily hadn't just lit a match, she'd set the entire internet ablaze. But even as the world clamored for more details, she couldn't bring herself to come forward. Not yet. Not until she understood who she really was. The flash drive had given her access to everything: names, locations, logs of each experiment, video footage of her own infancy in a sterile, white nursery. Her memories hadn't been hers, not exactly. They'd been placed there to protect her, to keep her compliant, normal, manageable. Her father, if she could still call him that, hadn't adopted her. He had hidden her after smuggling her out of the program. That scar on his side hadn't come from surgery. It had come from a bullet, fired by one of the security teams the day he stole her away. He had risked everything to give her a chance at freedom. And all along, she'd thought he was weak. But he was the strongest man she'd ever known. He was safe now, recovering in a hidden safe house arranged by Finch before his death. The last call she'd made before Corin went down had triggered a failsafe. The GPS tag in the ring had pinged emergency services with coordinates to extract him before Mark's team could relocate the body. Mark, or whatever version of him that had appeared in that lab. She still didn't know what side he was on, or even if he had a side. His final words haunted her. You decide what happens next. Maybe he had been another Echo, just like her. Maybe he was something else entirely. A deeper program. A handler. Or maybe he'd simply gone rogue. In the weeks that followed, global watchdog groups descended on Koronix. Congressional hearings launched. The surviving test subjects were located and liberated, some too weak to speak, others eerily lucid, as if they'd always known this moment would come. Emily visited a few in secret, blending into medical teams, listening to them recount fragmented dreams, images of her face appearing in their minds long before they had ever met her. They called her the signal, the anomaly, the one who had triggered their awakening. Whether she liked it or not, she had become a symbol, not just of rebellion, but of survival. Yet, even with the lab shut down and the world watching, a small part of the truth remained hidden. Koronix wasn't the only operation. Buried deep within the leaked files was a single encrypted line. Archive 73. Transfer completed. Awaiting reactivation. No location. No details. Just the implication that something, somewhere, was still dormant. Still waiting. And the ring, her father's ring, continued to pulse faintly with a signal only she could detect. Wherever the others were, whatever archive 73 was meant to become, she knew she hadn't seen the end. This was just the beginning of something far more dangerous, far more massive than she had ever imagined. So she didn't go back to her old life. That life was over. Instead, she disappeared. Changed her name. Burned the ring. But kept the signal. She carried it in her blood now. She started documenting everything, uploading it in pieces under an anonymous YouTube channel, coded with keywords like biotech whistleblower, genetic cloning exposed, government secrets they don't want you to know, and Echo Protocol real. The views were small at first, but the comments told her she wasn't alone. Others were listening. Others were watching. And some of them remembered. And late at night, when the world went quiet, she sometimes felt them, threads pulling through the darkness, connecting her to people she'd never met. People just like her. She hadn't chosen this path. But now, she was the only one who could walk it. And as the screen fades to black, a single whisper plays like a fading echo. The spark was never meant to burn out. It was meant to spread.